Last week, I talked about how Sarvam AI had made the news after raising $41 million, making it the biggest Series A funding round of any Indian AI startup in history. And this week, they've again made headlines by launching OpenHathi. This is their first Hindi large language model, and here's why it's a big deal, and also here's what we know about this relatively unknown startup that's making waves right now in India's tech scene. So the company has said that this is the first in the OpenHathi series where the company wants to build more such Indian language LLMs, and they've actually been using Meta's language model architecture called Llama 2.7b to build their first Hindi LLM. And according to Sarvam AI, their Hindi LLM performs Hindi tasks just as well as GPT 3.5, if not better. And that's pretty huge from a 5-month-old startup. But why is Sarvam AI so obsessed with building Indian language LLMs? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's because most Indian people, and this is no surprise, prefer speaking their local language from their state, from their region, more than English. And we all know how popular Hindi is across India, but also other languages like Bengali, for example, with 265 million speakers, and Marathi, 95 million speakers combined, have more speakers than the entire population of the United States. But here's the thing here, most LLMs are still being built in English, not Indian languages, which doesn't make a lot of sense considering how many speakers are speaking Indian languages. And Sarvam AI's team is probably the most qualified to actually make this happen, and that's the reason why investors have poured so much money into this 5-month-old startup. See, Sarvam AI's founders Pratyush Kumar and Vivek Ranjan have been working on building Indian language LLMs for a while. In fact, these two co-founders even built AI for Bharat, a research lab at IIT Madras in 2020 where they were developing Indian language LLMs and their applications. They've also worked with the government of India to build their own Indian language open source AI chatbot, Bhashini. And then apart from this, Vivek has also been working with Uday, the organization responsible for developing the Aadhaar project, for the last 10 years. And just wrapping this segment up with one final thought, Sarvam AI wants to build accessible Indian language LLMs which can be used by anybody in the country to build applications on top of them, which is really important. Being an infrastructure provider is a huge thing, and I wish these guys all the best. All right, next up in the news, this is pretty big, especially in the VC community. Omidyar Network, a venture fund that's been investing in India since 2010, has decided to shut down their operations in the country. And this came as a huge shock to pretty much everybody who believes in the India story, because these guys have invested $500 million across over 120 startups since 2010. And the question that everybody is asking is why? Why are they pulling out of India? See, unlike a lot of venture funds that are strictly for profit, Omidyar Network has made a number of investments in India that are not for profit as well. And according to the venture fund, there are a lot more Indian philanthropic and venture capital funds than there were back when they came into the picture back in 2010. And so basically they're saying that their work here is done and they want to move on to other countries that have more need. And that's the public statement that Omidyar Network made, but it might not be the whole picture because apparently they've been facing some issues with the Indian government for a while. Back in June of 2021, SEBI had debarred Omidyar Network's India head Rupa Kudova for participating in India's capital market for a year after she was accused of insider trading. Then there was also a bribery case against Omidyar Network after it was put on the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, the FCRA watch list in September of 2021 to secure an FCRA clearance, and this decision made sure that Omidyar Network's donations in India were restricted. In other words, the government of India has been suspicious of the kinds of not-for-profit investments that Omidyar Network has been making, to the point where the BJP's IT cell chief, Amit Malviya, had also accused Omidyar Network of having close ties with the Indian National Congress last month. But just zooming out here for a second and offering a slightly different perspective, I think this is probably the worst time for India's startup ecosystem to be losing active investors, not just because it means that there's less capital to go around, but also because it might create a domino effect where the global international VC community will look at Omidyar Network exiting the country and think, if they're leaving, maybe we should too. This has already been the worst year for Indian startups as funding has seen a 7-year low, and I just hope that this doesn't continue into 2024, and also that Indian startups and VCs that are operating in the country learn from the lessons of this funding winter and also the bubble that came before it. All right, next up in the news, growth for Swiggy and Zomato hasn't been as explosive as it was in the past. While Swiggy's food delivery business grew by 17% in the first half of FY24, Zomato's food delivery business grew by nearly 20% during that same period, and that's the reason why both companies have been expanding into different categories like, for example, quick commerce. But now they're also looking at another category to boost their revenue, and that's catering. And this might actually make perfect sense for them too, because right now Swiggy and Zomato are mainly serving everyday everyday customers, people like you and I who want to order in instead of cooking. But our order values aren't that much. Maybe we're going to spend 500, 600, 700 rupees, and that's it. But if they're getting into the catering business and they start using their huge network of restaurants and delivery partners, they might actually be able to build a much more profitable business. Firstly, order values could go through the roof with this kind of business because even ordering for a small house of people or an office party or a large event like a marriage could get their order values from just a couple thousand rupees to even as high as a couple lakh rupees for a single order. In other words, this business has higher order value and fewer deliveries, making for great margins. But right now, catering is mostly an unorganized market and highly dependent upon cash. And so it might not be that easy for them to get into this space initially, but if they can figure it out, this could change the fortunes for both Swiggy and Zomato. All right, moving on now to the funding news segment of this video. It's official, and I hinted at this earlier. It's been the worst year for Indian startups since 2017 when it comes to raising funds. So far, Indian startups have only raised $7.46 billion, and that's a 73% drop from last year's $25.8 billion. And while India added 23 unicorns in 2022, this year only 2 startups have become unicorns, Incred and Zepto. But zooming into this week specifically, things have actually been quite impressive. Indian startups have raised a total of $462.58 million compared to last week's $89.7 million. Now, the majority of these funds went to Bengaluru-based B2B e-commerce platform Udaan. They raised $340 million in their Series E round. Then we also have Bengaluru-based agri-tech startup Vigro. They offer a B2B platform connecting fruit farmers directly with wholesalers and traders, and they raised $46 million in their Series C round. After that, we have Gurugram-based lending startup iFinance. They raised $37.2 million in their Series F round. And then after that, we have Bengaluru-based sportswear manufacturing startup Agilitas Sports. And I've been waiting to see what happens with these guys for a while. It was started by Puma's former managing director, Abhishek Ganguly, and they raised $12 million in their latest round. And then finally, we have Shark Tank India featured Noida-based smart home automation solutions provider Aliste Technologies, and they offer devices that can turn every home into a smart home, and they raised $1 million in their latest funding round as well. All right, that is all the startup news that I have for you guys this week. I really hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one.